Hi everyone. Hope all you guys are doing good and keeping well. So, starting in with our today's topic, and it is actually the most important topic I would say from the point of view from the point of view of authentication. So, before we get on started with this topic, let me quickly introduce you guys with uh, myself. So my name is Rizwan, and I am one of the senior consultants working over here with Alif Consulting. And today in today's session, I'm going to talk about authentication and how authentication works within Office 365, wherein this similar thing is being working up with different Office 365 or different Microsoft process. Or projects or products, you can say, when it comes to Windows Office 365 or a Windows operating system, a Windows server, and so on. So authentication at every point of stage is being required. So what all authentication and protocols and algorithms are actually being supported with Office 365, we are going to have a quick look on that. So authentication in Office 365, and what is authentication? So we have been going through this topic, authentication, authorization, verification, validation, quite a lot. And if you want to understand all these things in details, I have given a very close definition of what authentication, authorization, and validation all means from my past videos. So what is authentication and why it is being required in Office 365? So it is the purpose for your of authentication would be to simply make a secure channel or a secure bridge when you are making access to your resources. So if you have something called as username and password which needs to be validated at the other side where your credentials usually get saved, so to be able to check those credentials, that mechanism is called as authentication. And how it is checked is by creating certain algorithms which actually makes it a check and makes it run through. Because if there would be any flaw within this algorithm or within this process, then yes, you cannot tell that system or that ecosystem as a stable product, and it would be having issues, while anyone would be able to jailbreak it, manipulate with it, and can easily get into your system if your authentication mechanism is not that good and you have security breaches, kind of a scenario being getting generated. So the most important thing is authentication should be very strong. So yes, Office 365 nowadays, it got started from the year exchange in the year 2003, when it was supporting the basic authentication. So when we talk about authentication within Office 365, as of now, we only have two authentications being supporting, and it has been quite news going on from past uh, maybe 3-4 years, that Microsoft is planning to completely undergo basic authentication. But it is not that easy now, because so all these things works in with several different products. Let's say for Exchange it would be different, for OneDrive it would be different, for Office, for Share, for other services it would be different. It could go in that format, or you have some applications hosted on premises, or you have some applications being getting and deployed on the Office 365, the Azure Portal Enterprise applications, which works on some REST APIs. So those APIs or those applications which runs at the on-premises, for certain businesses, it would not be possible that those applications are actually the most advanced ones, and they may not understand modern authentication, or and they are still being running on the legacy authentication, that is basic authentication. So why there was a need that basic authentication is still being to set up? Because of this pandemic itself, it was being told that by the end of 2022, Microsoft would be completely bypassing or would be completely deprecating basic authentication for mailboxes services. But you would have also checked this information under Message Center, Health and Office Admin Center portal, but it was just being told, but it was never executed. I mean, just do not know what is Microsoft going to take action on that. But for us to be able to understand as if what is a basic authentication and what is a modern authentication. So authentication as itself means that it is going to validate your details. That is two things: your username and your password. So how does this thing goes? Whenever you make a request using your client, now when I say client, it could be your web browser where you would be entering the URL, and that is portal.office.com. You'd get a page, enter your username and password, so those details goes in the form to the server where it is supposed to authenticate it. So the client could be your mobile phone's web browser, your EAS protocol, or any such, your Outlook desktop client. So this could be anything. So what basic authentication does is it has its own Windows prompt pop up, and whenever you enter the details, that is the username and the password, so that details actually goes to the server in the form of plain text. Now when I say plain text, yes, basic, definitely it is not in an encrypted format. So I mean, if there's anyone who would be trying to manipulate with the services by doing a network attack, a DDoS attack, or any such attack, it could be anything, any kind of an attack. And if there's any man in the middle, which would be like a blind SQL or any such thing, I'm just giving as an example. So it would be quite easy for that person to be able to get those details, because he is going to sniff or copy or stole all this information coming from the server, and before it even reaches the destination, that is the Office 365 server wherein the authentication is supposed to get happen, the information would be sniffed in the middle itself, and it would be containing the username and password. And the second time the user would be entering these details are captured, so the attacker can just enter these details and just get it go through, and with this way it would be pretty easier for the attacker to be able to manipulate with the things. So ultimately, by giving the authentication to an improper person, so whichever services you would be having access to, that is called as authorization, so he would be able to get the complete access, and he will be able to make whatever changes he would like to have. So this is all dependent on authentication. So basic authentication runs on a protocol called as DAuth. Modern authentication works on a protocol called as OAuth. So these are protocol names. In technical terms, you can call it as DAuth or OAuth, but in layman terms, it is still be considered as a basic authentication or a modern authentication. So this was the most important the drawback of basic authentication, which is still, because many of the times it is being still widely used within Office 365 environment itself, because it is being supported by most of the legacy applications. If Microsoft directly buy closes this, so for the applications which do not understand modern authentication, either they have to upgrade their devices, their hardware, or they have to change their product and go to a certain vendor who supports basic authentication. Microsoft cannot take that amount of a big risk, so Microsoft keeps on making announcement that if you have any of your legacy applications, kindly either upgrade it, because I'm going to go get basic authentication disabled. And this is the reality which we have been hearing from past 3 4 years. Definitely it has go to an end, because at the end, if there's anything which goes wrong, and they can easily come to Microsoft stating that you are the one who was supposed to be handling and encrypting and making my security more better. But Microsoft indeed would say that I'm already trying and is in the phase to do that. But if there are certain entities which do not want modern authentication, and it would also make an impact on Microsoft business as well. So it is all about the business gaps and the customer education, I would say, or the technology education, which a person or a customer should be able to understand when he would be approaching towards the product. And to overcome this, whenever you would be registering a new tenant within Microsoft 365 after 2019, by default there is modern authentication getting enabled for all of your user objects. That is modern authentication. Now what is modern authentication? Definitely it is not sending the details across in the form of plain text. The details, whichever details which is being sent, it is being sent in an encrypted format. So the private key of is applied, and the server would already accordingly be containing the key for it, the public key, so that it gets decrypted. And even if this information gets sniffed in the middle by the man in middle, or if someone's smart people would try to get it done, they'd not be able to do that. The reason being, even if they get the encrypted information, they do not have that decrypted key with it. And practically speaking, it all works on the SSL medium channel, so they cannot generate their own architecture or mechanism which would actually be encrypting I'm sorry, decrypting that same piece of code. So practically it would not be possible for a modern authentication to be getting in blocked, and this is the reason in over here about basic authentication. So you see, in basic authentication works by prompting in a website visitor for a username and password. And as said, because many of the browsers, so it is just not the web applications, I'm sorry, the hardware itself, because there are still some browsers, web browsers present over the internet which just understands basic authentication. So this is being widely used method, which is actually the risky method nowadays as well, because even if you are going with this method, you cannot guarantee that your data is actually secure, because if your username and password, both the things are set for a toss, data is the resources which you would be applying after having the validation done, that also goes for a toss, and no one can guarantee that you are actually into the secure ecosystem. And this is where modern authentication comes into the picture. It is not a single handshake or a single authentication. We called it as a multi-factor authentication or a DL authentication. Now, you can say modern authentication or MFA, that is the folder, the MFA, that is the authentication method, the authentication dual mechanism method. It is a part of modern authentication. It is a part of modern authentication. Then the second part could be the services, the conditional access services. So these are all driven from modern authentication, the single sign on, wherein you would just be keeping one single password, even if you would be having that same object accessing multiple resources, some on the on premises, some on the cloud, some on some different hosting provider channel. So modern authentication would still be a very strong hand on that, wherein you'd easily be able to run it. And if you see the bottom line in over here, modern authentication is an umbrella term for a combination of authentication and authorization methods between a client and a server, and how these things are done are using these methods. You see, authentication methods, authorization, it would definitely be giving the authorization policies once the authentication is done, and definitely this all communication would be set on a secure channel by having it on an encrypted level. What is the advantage of modern authentication? Definitely, for sure, it would be much secure. Identities who supporting modern authentication would be ensuring that whatever authentication they are supposed to be getting it done, even it is being coming through a secure channel from a web browser, or from a web proxy server, or from the client. So the best example of it is multi-factor authentication. That is basically a method wherein you can use this method even if you would be entering the password, that would again be in an encrypted format, and if someone by default decrypts it, so at the other side it would trigger this dual based authentication, wherein it would say, I understand that you have entered the correct password, but I would require an additional source of verification from your side. So what it is going to ask you, it may ask you for your email address for verification purposes, your phone number, so that it sends you a code, a 6 digit, 4 digit, 5 digit, whatever supported method, a 6 digit code, so that till the time you would not be entering that code, it is not going to allow you. So basically that code would actually be getting and added as a token. Till the time you do not fulfill the token to the server is not going to give you the access or the authorization. And the third one would be the authenticator application. So nowadays, if you feel, many big organizations have deployed the authenticator app services, wherein if you would be giving it the authentication with the help of a notification or a code, then only you would be able to get in the services through which you have the resources available to. So this would be all from my side for this one. This was more to be like an explanatory kind of a video, I would say, but still, if you'd like to check if what are the features for modern authentication and how to get it checked, and how to check if modern authentication is actually being enabled on your tenant or not. So firstly, I'll just show you from the Azure portal, I will probably here, as where you can actually check where is MFA or where is modern authentication. So if you go here under users, active users, you see you have multi-factor authentication. That is again a part of two-way authentication. So for many of my accounts, if you see, it is being actually set to disabled, and if you see in over here for this account in over here, it is actually enabled. So enabled and enforced are two different things. If you would be enforcing an account, so every single instance a sign-in attempt which would be made against this user using any of the client like a web browser or such, it would be enforced, and every time it would be asking up for that step. And if you would see here in Azure Active Directory under security, so you have conditional access. So these are basically the policies. I do not have any one of it created, and if I would be creating in a policy over here, so it would simply be showing me all these options which applications I'd like to select. So let's say if I'll go this for all of the users, okay, and the next option would be, it would ask me for which all applications you would like to get this selected, whether it would be for user or just for authentication purposes. So let's say if I just select this as cloud based applications, so this one is going to give me all the applications, whichever applications which are there, which are supported by Azure. So if I'll select Office 365 as an application, okay, it would be giving me the conditions what I'll be doing with this sign in risk device platform. So let's say if I'll select in over here configure, and I'll say I'll only need to accept or block the connection coming from an Android, let me select iOS platform or Windows. You can select all these options in over here, and it would be asking you whether you would like to block it for location. If there's any connection which is coming from a selected location, let's say if you'd be selecting in this option, you would be getting a list of all the countries, MFA trusted IPs, countries, and you can easily select the country name in over here, and automatically it is going to apply for that country. Okay, and there it is, the IP addresses. You just need to provide in those IP addresses so you can get it blocked or allowed, whatever actions you actually select. Client apps, whether it should be a browser or a mobile app or an Exchange Active Sync client, what is it? You can just select this, and you can click on these next level of option which says, okay, I believe, okay, now I can go to the next one. So what do you want to do with this one, whether you like to block it, so it is simply going to block it. If you need to grant access, so you see this require multi-factor authentication, so by default it is going to enable multi-factor, and this is the key point of a key modern authentication which it would be required with this one. So automatically modern authentication would be enforced if you would be doing it with this way. So this is how a policy gets treated. And if you'll again go to the security tab, it would also be giving you all these options in over here. If your connections are being coming in through you see Rizwanuri, it would be giving you all the details in over here, as if what all are the details in over here, from what is the risk man and all these things, and risky sign-ins. So if there would be any risky sign-ins, it was quickly going to give you the data provided in you over here. And for any user, if you need to provide with this settings, you would also go to sign-in logs, and you can easily check as if which authentication is actually getting enabled. If there's any user within your organization who's actually using MFA, that is modern authentication, you see this authentication requirement. So all is single authentication, because if I have enabled single authentication, there is basic authentication on my tenant, but yes, I can easily get it done after enabling modern authentication. And if I need to check if I've enabled this on my tenant or not, so the command to that would be get hyphen organization configuration pipe fl, and I just need to enter this word, that would be auth. So the parameter for that would be client to auth profile enabled. This, and that is set to true. So right now for my organization, what I see is OAuth to client profile enabled is set to true. If I would go ahead and set this to false, I'll not be able to enable modern authentication. So if you see this on my entire tenant, modern authentication is actually enabled. And I believe if this is being still there, I can show you this option from the GUI as well. So it should be in there under aux settings. Aux settings, and we can search for what was that, multi authorization. There it is, modern authentication. So if you would see in this option, you can also do it through GUI. If the people who are not being that familiar with the PowerShell module, you see, turn on modern authentication. But this one is like more segregated, so it would just be turning on the modern authentication only for Outlook 2013 and the later clients. Okay, it is not going to turn it this for entire organization. If you see, allow basic access to basic authentication protocol. So let's say for tomorrow, if I'll go ahead and disable all this, so from any client which supports basic authentication, and if it includes these client, and if I've disabled that, they'll actually not be working if I would be checking this off, and it would be strictly with modern authentication and over here. So be very specific, understanding what actually is a modern authentication and a basic authentication, and how does it actually works. So that would be all and pretty much from my side for this one. If you have any of your further queries or any such clarification or doubts which needs to be clarified, feel free to contact us on info@alifconsulting.com. And that would be all from my side for this specific session. I hope you guys liked it, and that is it. You take care of yourself and you stay safe. Have a good day. Bye bye.